Thanks. Good morning. So I'm David Rosenberg. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hycrete, and we sell a product that's a new way of building and designing buildings, of constructing buildings. So here it starts off from the chemistry side. We developed a unique molecule, a water-based molecule that takes on properties of an oil. So we think back to high school chemistry, how water and oil separate, don't go together. And here it's extremely unique to have properties of a water-based molecule that takes on properties of an oil. That's what we're trying to demonstrate with this long squiggly line that's representative of a hydrocarbon chain that's often seen in oil-based molecules. And the other side is a polar. The negative is a polar particle that reacts to other polar particles. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And that's an image of what we sell today of our core product. It looks a lot like the beers we were all drinking last night in the pub. So we found that in applications of concrete, if you put this in concrete, which is a wonderful material, it's the world's most widely used construction material, big market size, $300 billion market, readily available, relatively inexpensive, can be used anywhere. But the fundamental flaw of concrete is that it's a hard sponge. It acts like a sponge. Water, dissolved salts are flushed right through it, absorbed right through it. And the other property of concrete that's a negative, it has very poor tensile strength, very good compression strength, very poor tensile strength. So for that reason, we use steel reinforcement. And as water with dissolved salts get pulled into the concrete, there's an oxidation that occurs, which is a chemical reaction that leads to rust, which expands, and the concrete then cracks, and then more dissolved salts and waters come through the concrete. So it's a big problem. And what we've done is we've put our admixture in, and it turns concrete from this hard sponge material to just like water and oil repel each other, turns it into a waterproof material. And if you're a concrete engineer, this is possibly the coolest thing you've ever seen in concrete, having been shown this to concrete engineers all over the world. So this is hydrophobic concrete, and I'm a walking show and tell, so if anyone's interested, I have specimens I could show you afterwards. But we don't change the porosity of concrete. We make it hydrophobic by putting this material in it. And the other thing we do is we help protect the steel reinforcement from corroding. So I mentioned that polar particle at the other end, which is significant because that steel corrodes. So at the nano level, we protect the steel when the concrete gets around the steel. So preventing the steel from corroding, both from corrosion initiation and corrosion propagation, which is when it grows. So this is purely to demonstrate. We've been in lots of testing, which is important before engineers spec you into their designs. We've been in lots of testing by a really long time, federally sponsored testing, Department of Transportation testing, industry testing. And as a consequence, the U.S. Federal Highway Administration, Department of Transportation announced us as a technology ready for implementation. So here we are, we're camera ready, we're excited to go to market, and we figured where else to go but to the construction industry, and to the construction industry, where who else would embrace a technology like this but an owner? We thought of bridges, highways, and that sort of thing, where they own the structure, they own the bridge for a long time, and they're incentivized that it doesn't degrade over time. And we found we were wrong. So this is from a business perspective. From an operational perspective, it's a beautiful application for our infrastructure. From a business perspective, we weren't selling much product. We got into some bridges and some infrastructures projects throughout the country, throughout the United States, but it wasn't taking hold. And what the kind of questions we got was, this seems great, but have you been in a project for 20 years? And as a relatively young company, our answer unfortunately was no. And that was a real barrier to entry. And there's a real the construction industry is not an industry that embraces innovation, that embraces change. So getting over that hurdle was very challenging. They'd also ask us if we're a proprietary technology, which the answer was yes, and then the spec of proprietary technology, almost better to use the same old stuff, even if it's not as good. And when departments of transportation agreed to put us in a category of a material to use, they put us in a bucket that was a generic bucket for either keeping water out or preventing corrosion. And then it's up to the contractor to choose which material he wants to choose, and he goes for the cheapest material in the bucket. So as a consequence, going after this industry wasn't working, and we had to look at the data as Ben would say, and the data told us that we need to make a quick change. Fortunately for us, concrete is used in a lot of places. And we looked at the commercial construction market, and we realized that from a waterproofing perspective, you use concrete and you need to use waterproofing in lots of parts of the structure. And here we're showing in the dark gray area, you use waterproofing in the foundation, in tanking systems, balconies, roofing systems, plaza decks. And what we realized is the conventional method of waterproofing didn't work so well. So these are conventional systems, and theoretically what the user is trying to do is wrap it with a construction in a big bag, like a big plastic bag. And it's really, really hard to wrap construction with all its intricacies in a big bag. There are pipes going in, workmanship can be an issue. So here's an example of different types of membranes and coatings. That's what these bags are. And it's often applied. You can see these are black materials. They're often petroleum-based materials. They off-gas, have high volatile organic compounds. There's a lot of packaging involved. But worst of all, it's very problematic. Imagine not only is it problematic because it's torn during construction, but where there's a pipe penetration, those are vulnerabilities that often leak, and fixing it is a huge pain. So if you imagine that we're in a foundation of a building, so you dig down typically before you dig up, and afterwards you pour the walls, and then you backfill it, and you put dirt back along the sides of a building. And if there's a rip or if there's a leak in your structure, and you try and fix that leak, the leak might be in one spot, but the breach in the membrane or coating might be someplace else. And that membrane's on the other side of the wall. So it's very hard to fix, and it's what's called chasing leaks, fixing that leak, unless you dig up the other side and look for the membrane that's broken. So we realized that this is the biggest, most litigated part of construction, the biggest pain. You ask a contractor, what's your most painful part of construction? And if he's honest, he'd say waterproofing. So we realized that we could develop a way of replacing this whole system of construction. So construction is very sequential. You can't do step C until you do step B, which is often the case. And this is one of the earlier parts of construction, and we developed a design that eliminates that. We sell a design that eliminates it. So taking away this membrane or coating, and I can't think of another product that embodies the simplicity of one of the mantras of sustainability is do more with less. And that's what we're doing. So on the top, this is a visualization of what happens when you put on a membrane or coating. It's surface preparation. Then you put on certain glues to keep the membrane on. You put on a membrane. Sometimes you put on a topping coat. And instead, we put the waterproofing, our materials, an admixture in the concrete. And as soon as you pour the concrete, it's done. And your waterproofing's finished. So it's huge time savings. And this is an image of one of our early projects in a deep foundation. And this is really jaw-dropping stuff. When you bring an owner, a developer, a contractor to a foundation of a building, and you're in the water table. On this project, we're right near a lake. We're at 30 feet in the water table, and you tell him there's no membrane or coating here, and he touches the wall, and you're in the water table, and it's bone dry. That's amazing stuff. And here you could see, typically you'd see black stuff along the edges of the wall. That's the membrane or coating, so that's just eliminated. This is membrane-free construction. And we brought a future customer there, and he didn't believe us that we were in the water table. So we actually got permission to drill a hole in the slab on grade on the ground to show him. And as you can see from the image on the right, there was actually so much water pressure that it started going up like a fountain. And of course we fixed it. We didn't leave it like that. So we realized that we just went from a product company to do this, to fully integrate this technology. We went from a product company to a solution company, which meant that we had to be involved in the design and pre-construction. We had to be involved in the design, the pre-construction meetings. We had to be there at the site inspections the day before and the day of construction to make sure everything goes smoothly. Because ultimately, what we realized is what the customer wants. He doesn't really care how you waterproof the structure. What he wants is just a waterproof structure. And then thinking about it further, we realized what he's really buying is peace of mind. And then thinking it further, we realized what we really need to be is a warranty company, which is the same as an insurance company. So I often look at ourselves as an insurance company. We sell peace of mind. So I hired someone who was at Turner Construction. Turner's one of the largest general contractors in the world. I hired someone who was considered their concrete contractor expert. And I gave him a blank piece of paper, and I told him to write the warranty he always wanted. His dream warranty that he never got from typical manufacturers which is what he did. And we feel confidently we have the best warranty, at least in the United States, possibly the world, that eliminates a lot of legalese, that in essence elegantly says, if it leaks, we fix it. So typically in construction, it's this is, as I said, the most litigated, painful part of construction. It's a finger-pointing exercise. When something goes wrong, the installer blames the manufacturer, which blames the designer, which blames the contractor, which blames the concrete contractor, and everyone's passing the blame. And we ask all the fingers be pointed to us, and if it leaks, we fix it. And what I'm most proud of is we've gone into hundreds of jobs, and we've taken the most painful part of construction, and now today we have 100% customer satisfaction. Our customers love us, and what some people see as risky, I think this is the most riskless way to construct your buildings. So in doing this, we went from, in the infrastructure side, one of the other reasons we couldn't sell is because people would say, okay, you're going to extend the service life of our bridge from 30 years to 100 years. But how does that help me today? And there's really very little of an embrace of innovation because that's just not how typically the incentives work at the decision-making side of departments of transportation and the Federal Highway Administration, that sort of work. So we had to change our business model. And in this business model, we have a value proposition where A, it's a better product, it's dry day one. You have project acceleration by eliminating that step of construction, and it's less expensive day one. And I'll give it an example there. And it's green. And I'll give it another example here. And once we figured this out, that's where our business really started to take off. And when you look at the history of adoption and innovation in the concrete world, it's very slow. So if in like computer speeds, if we hear of Moore's law where computer speeds are doubled every 2 to 3 years, in concrete I'd argue it's every 2,000 years, and it's probably because of Hycrete today where we changed that fundamental from a sponge to a hydrophobic material. So from a green perspective, we went into a project, this is a law school that we built called the Thomas Jefferson Law School, and we contributed a LEED point. So the Green Building Council has this system called LEEDs that rates buildings on their environmental intelligence, and it's a big deal to get them to understand the value that we bring, and a customer using us now can get a LEED point for using us in the system, and it comes up, the value is severalfold. One is we're able to quantify, on every job we do, we quantify how many pounds of petroleum-based product we saved, how many pounds of volatile organic compounds we saved that adhere the membrane, how many pounds of landfill, and concrete is like in some people's estimate is 10% of the world's landfill, which is a shame because fundamentally it's sand, rock, water, and cement. It should be a reusable material and can be. And it's often because of dissolved salts that enter the concrete or high toxicity things we put on the concrete that it loses its sustainability. So we're able to quantify this, including carbon savings, and the U.S. Green Building Council says that's great, but what are you using instead of it? And it's very important to us on the lower right, and I'm going to talk about it later, is we have this cradle-to-cradle certification, which in our mind is the highest form of environmental certification, and we're very proud. Hycrete is the very first cradle-to-cradle certified product. So we had to change some things about our manufacturing process. We also had to change some things about our chemistry to get this certification. It's a high hurdle, and again, something that we're really proud that we achieved. So not only was the green savings pretty significant, but this is a demonstration of the cost savings. We were able to show that on a square footage basis, and one thing that we did that was smart in our company, concrete sold 3-dimensionally, but to the customer replacing membranes, that's a 2-dimensional sale. So we were able to change our value proposition and the way we communicate cost to our customer to a 2-dimensional system. And there, comparing apples to apples, we're actually 30% less than traditional membranes and coatings. So on a material savings, we're about, if the upper right numbers, we're about $200,000 less. And from a time savings, and this is that critical path, so they estimated here on the foundation walls, they save 17 days. And we asked the contractor on the slab, they save 10 days. And we asked the contractor, how much money, if we save you 1 day, what's that worth? And he told us $10,000, which we thought was low, but using his numbers, they saved approximately $300,000 of time. So adding it together, we saved them $500,000. And in a building like this one, which is probably about a $40 million building, I'm always amazed at how much risk contractors take on for relatively low single-digit margins. So to bring about $500,000 to the bottom line is fairly significant. So now in scaling up, we still kept getting the questions, well, how long have you been in a market? So we decided to focus on a sector of commercial construction where our value proposition was so strong, it's almost silly not to use us. And for us, that was parking. So below grade and above grade parking, that means below, when you dig down and build a parking lot underneath a building, we wanted to own this space. And here's where our value proposition is better, faster, less expensive, green. And it's also the reason we chose this, it's relatively low risk. So worst comes to worst, if you have a leak in your parking spot and you have a little trickle of water, it's not nearly as significant if it's finished space and you have an apartment or a store down there. So that has worked very well for us. And again, looking at the data, that's where we focus our space. And from here, and this is an example of the cost savings here, instead of we go on the top deck of that parking lot, where usually they're refinishing it every 5 to 10 years. Instead, they pour the concrete once and they don't have to use it again. So on a material basis, we save them $60,000 and over $1 million if you look at a 30-year life of a building and not having to resurface it every 5 to 10 years. We save them over $1 million. So once we figured that out, that's when our business started to grow. And now we're in 9 locations in the US, and even in a down construction market, we're still opening new locations. We're 4 international, and we go into big buildings. This year we're doing the new Amazon headquarters, the new Nintendo headquarters, the new Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We recently did a 5-acre green roof for Microsoft, and we're growing rapidly. And we work with the largest contractors, engineers, owners in the country. We're also getting a lot of news, and recently I was invited to the White House.
When you hear the innovation that's taking place, everything from LED lighting that can save a huge amount on energy costs to new concrete materials that last longer and are waterproofed from the inside out, and that can mean that bridges and roads and buildings can last 20 or 30 years longer than using conventional concrete. When you look at what's being done with solar energy right now in places like Houston and Florida, and the fact that many of these companies are exporting their goods and their services, but unfortunately their biggest markets right now are Europe and Japan, because we haven't done enough to emphasize clean energy in our own country. That gets you excited about the future.
So we're winning these awards. Time magazine announced us number 4 on companies that are leading on the energy frontier. We got an award for the World Economic Forum as a technology pioneer, defined as companies that are evolutionizing their industry. And it seemed a little off balance for a relatively small concrete company. And what I realized is the reason why we're getting this recognition isn't as much of what we're doing, which isn't to minimize the significance of what we're doing in waterproofing construction, but in the grand picture, there's a lot more going on. It's more of what we represent. And what we represent, and the other CEOs, so there are 8 CEOs that were invited to talk to the president about what we're doing well and where the country needs to move from an innovation standpoint. And most of them were carbon-related companies, solar-related companies. And it's, I think, somewhat the acknowledgement of A, there's a really big negative footprint from the construction space that needs to be addressed. And B, it's more the needs are more than just carbon. So we all know what's going on in Copenhagen, where the COP15 is meeting in December, and the G20 is there to try and understand what we're going to roll out. And everyone's talking about potentially a cap-and-trade system in carbon. And maybe we should have a cap-and-trade system in our raw materials. If you look at what's happening with copper, phosphates, materials like that, it's about waste, which there's a ton of waste in construction. It's about pollution. It's about innovative design, environmentally intelligent materials. And that's a lot of what we represent. And it's also about green jobs. So certainly the Obama administration is talking about how we need more green jobs. We need to train people. And a lot of when you integrate new technologies into an existing fabric, you need to educate people on how to do that integration. And as we developed our business plan, I learned that far too many CEOs, talking to other CEOs of other clean tech companies, far too many companies failed at the last mile, so integrating that technology. And we decided early on that we were going to thrive on the last mile, so integrating technology into construction. And that's where, actually, I think that's one of the strongest parts beyond the technology itself. That's the strongest part of our company is our people. And we put a lot of resources into training our people. So where we take a field worker, someone who is a field worker on a construction site, we put him the training and enable him to be a decision maker, where he's interacting with contractors, engineers, architects, developers every day and making decisions. And that's a fundamental shift. And what that does is add another tool to the tool chest of that field worker and makes him embody that image that we think of when we are talking about creating green jobs. So getting to cradle, I mentioned we were the first cradle-to-cradle certified company, certified product, not company, product. This was when we were looking at the different types of certifications out there, it's easy to get confused. And the reason why we gravitated to cradle, this one really stood out for us. And a lot of people, Michael Braumgart was one of the doer lectures last year. And it's based on a book originally written, not originally, it was written by Michael Braumgart, who's a chemist out of Germany, and William McDonough, who's an architect out of the US. And the two linked up and started off with this wonderful philosophy. And at the highest level is how do we love all children of all species forever, for all time? And from there, understanding that we have to improve our environment, they talked about when we make decisions in life, especially corporate decisions, we should think of three different forces. Is it good for the environment? Two, is it not in any necessary order, but also is it good for the society we're living in? And also, is it good for profitability? And as a CEO with shareholders, very loud shareholders, we realized that third piece about profitability was really important to me, because and anything but that is charity, which is not sustainable. So true sustainability is profitability, and that's important and not something to be afraid of or look down upon. So they also talk about what's eco-effective versus eco-efficient. And here it's not about doing less bad, it's about doing good. So if you pollute a little less, you're still polluting. So let's cut out pollution. And talking about breaking up materials as biological and technological nutrients. So you have, and this is how products should be designed, where you have biological nutrients that degrade effectively to the ground and compost, and you have technological nutrients that could be upcycled. Like lead in a computer, for example, can be upcycled and reused again and again and again. And the key is to design them in a way where they don't get commingled. And it's when you get commingled where you often have waste. So if you have like a wooden desk and you put some laminate on that you can't take off, instead of composting that desk, all of a sudden it's going to landfill. And there are examples of products like this that work. Here's a fabric that can be composted, then eaten by a nice sheep that returns wool back to to society or back to the manufacturer, and then you also have carpets that can be separated. And here's an example of a carpet by Shaw, where you could actually split up the back fabric, the back matting material, which has polyolefins, and that could be upcycled, tear it up, mushed up, and they actually collect this. So it's almost like renting the carpet. And then you have certain fibers, nylons that could also be reused. And other items, you have chairs. And this is lots of products that we interact with, which are designed in a way so it could be broken down and separated. You have some biological nutrients, some technological nutrients, and they could be reused again and again. So the key is to imagine a world where waste goes away, eliminating waste. And I'm getting more involved on the policy side. And what the administration, the Obama administration, is certainly very proactive in changing our world, and it's great to have leadership like that. And it's, in my mind, it starts with bold goals. So let's think at the highest level. And what are the bold goals that have tremendous transformative properties? And here are 4 simple ones. One, if we make all breast milk safe to drink. Imagine what that affects. That affects everything that we're putting into our bodies, everything we're eating, all the pesticides have to go away, things like that. What if we make all papers as biological nutrients? So right now there are a lot of off-gassing that occurs, some different inks that are used on papers. What happens if all indoor quality, something from a construction industry I could relate to, if all indoor quality is better than outdoor quality? Again, huge transformative properties and how it affects what we build. What if we return all phosphates? design our world so we return all phosphates to our topsoil. And this is a huge problem with our topsoils getting eroded, and our topsoils contain so much of our carbon. So in working with the administration, which I was back in working with the White House on Monday, talking about what are these bold goals. And right now we're at this somewhat fortunate point in the world where there's a huge recession. And fortunate because government and this Keynesian philosophy is trying to help us spend our way out of this recession. So in that way, there's a way of rewarding behavior with all this stimulus money. So it would be a shame if, for example, we build the same old bridges we've been doing forever, or for the last 10 years, 100 years, we should design them better. A goal could be, let's design it for a 100-year life instead of 30-year life. Let's use less waste on the construction side and so forth. So use public funds that encourage innovation. And finally, it's increased standards of performance. So in our example, it's raise the standard of performance that incentivizes innovation. Okay. Anyway, thank you.